Your Majesty, we bring you the finest cloth in all the land. I am very smart, you know. This cloth has a magical property, Your Majesty. It is invisible to anyone who is fake, a loser, or, heaven forbid, a fraud. Anyone in the crowd, you mean? Anyone, Your Majesty, including the wearer. Excuse me? But you don't have to worry, Your Majesty. You can see it, can't you? Yes, of course, I see it. Of course you do, Your Majesty. Let me put it on you. Wow, I look fantastic. Like a real billionaire, Your Majesty. Damn, that's a nice suit for our king. What a brilliant businessman. A real billionaire. But he isn't wearing any clothes. What did he say? Not wearing clothing? Is that kid stupid? Shut up! He's a self-made billionaire genius, the greatest businessman who ever lived. You may have heard of this before. Hans Christian Andersen wrote it in 1837. It's called The Emperor's New Clothes. Your dad probably read it to you at bedtime, between glances at the football. He mumbled something about a naked king and turned off the light. You pretty much missed everything from the story. The first thing he forgot to mention, the emperor had a name. Donald. This is the real story of Donald Trump, explained like you're 5. Before Donald Trump became Donald Trump, there was a man named Fred. Fred Trump built brick apartment buildings in Queens. Working class apartments, nothing glamorous. He filled them with working families, kept them standing for 40 years, and died rich without anyone outside Queens knowing his name. Fred was careful. Fred was disciplined. Fred was actually a good businessman. But Fred wasn't just running a business. Fred was trying to build a son to inherit it. A specific kind of son. Fred wanted what he called a killer. A kid who would never apologize, never lose, never let anyone treat him as anything less than a king. Fred had 5 children. Most of them weren't killers. The first one Fred tried to make into one was named Freddie. Freddie was the oldest. Freddie was kind. Freddie was funny. Freddie did not want the empire. Freddie moved to Massachusetts and became an airline pilot, which, in Fred's house, was the worst possible answer. Donald was attempt number 2. What did you do at school today? I got a B on my spelling test. Did anyone get an A? Yes. Then you lost. I lost? There are 2 kinds of people in this world, Donald. Killers and losers. Which one are you? A train conductor? No. A fireman? Donald? A dinosaur? Killer or loser? A loser? Killer, Donald. Killer. I'm a killer. Good boy. Good boy. Fred ran that exact drill every day, every breakfast, every dinner for 20 years. And what happens when a kid hears that his whole childhood? He starts believing it. 1964, the Verrazano Bridge opens. Fred takes 18-year-old Donald to the opening ceremony. The designer, an 85-year-old Swiss engineer named Othmar Ammann, stands in the crowd. The mayor gives a speech. The governor gives a speech. Yet nobody mentions the architect's name. Fred turns to his son and lets him notice. Donald would later say for the rest of his life, if you let people treat you how they want, you'll be made a fool. I don't want to be anybody's sucker. Donald would spend the next 60 years making sure his name was on the building, every building. A few months after the bridge ceremony, Fred decided to give Donald a final exam. The task, drive up to Massachusetts and tell Freddie the lessons he'd learned. Donnie, what are you doing here? Dad sent me. Oh? He wanted me to tell you, you're nothing but a glorified bus driver. Oh. Freddie was 8 years older than Donnie. He loved him. That line cracked him. Before Donald had built anything of his own, he had broken his own brother, and his dad loved it. The killer or loser binary wasn't the only thing Donald inherited from Fred. Over the years, Fred transferred approximately $413 million to Donald, but Fred didn't hand the money over the normal way. He handed it over through a company called All County Building Supply. All County's only job was to invoice Fred's buildings for things that didn't exist, mark those invoices up 20 to 50%, and pass the money to Fred's children as business expenses rather than taxable gifts. The accountants saw it, they signed off anyway. The IRS saw it, They filed it anyway. It's like when daddy gives you too much sugar, but mommy ignores it. Life is good. Only years later, a New York Times investigation and eventually a judge would use a very specific word for the whole setup: fraud. But by then, Donald had already learned the lesson Fred really wanted him to learn. You could build a company that didn't exist, sell things that weren't real, commit a crime in plain sight, and if you said it confidently enough, adults in suits would pretend along with you. A lesson that would shape him for the rest of his life. But Donald wasn't done learning. All of this was Queens. Donald didn't want Queens. Donald wanted Manhattan. And in Manhattan, he was going to need a new kind of teacher. By the early 1970s, Donald had taken over his father's rental business, Trump Management, and moved his ambitions to Manhattan. In 1973, the United States Department of Justice took a look at how Trump Management was renting apartments. Their conclusion: Donald and his father had been systematically refusing to rent to black families. Applications from black tenants were marked with the letter C for colored and quietly thrown away. The DOJ filed suit. It was the first time Donald's name appeared in a federal courtroom. A normal lawyer would have told him to settle quietly and apologize. Donald did not hire a normal lawyer. He hired Roy Cohn. Roy Cohn was famous for representing the heads of New York's biggest mob families. "I just got sued by the federal government." "Did you do it?" "Well, technically, that's not what I asked." "Did you do it?" "Yes." "Doesn't matter." "It doesn't?" "Donald, the federal government has been trying to put me in jail since 1954, and look what President Nixon is doing to me." 4 rules. 1. Deny everything, even the parts that, especially those. 2. Countersue for triple. Triple what? Doesn't matter. Pick a number with zeros. 3. When they get scared and want to settle, you still keep your mouth shut. "But people will know what we did." People know what you tell them. 4. When it's over, you tell everyone you won. "But what if we lose?" Have we ever lost? "No, Mr. Cohn." You see, Donald? What Cohn taught Donald that night was a 4-step method that Donald would run identically for the next 50 years. Step 1, never admit anything. Step 2, counterattack with a scary amount. Step 3, settle without admitting guilt. Step 4, call it a win no matter what. It's like cheating on a test, getting away with it, and telling your mom your kindergarten teacher said you were brilliant. And you know what? This strategy worked. Donald sued the federal government back for $100 million. The court threw the countersuit out within weeks. When Donald walked out of the courtroom, he told everyone he won. He was thrilled. He'd beaten the federal government. But beating the racism case wasn't what mattered. What mattered was the 4-step machine, a machine that turned losing situations into winning headlines just by convincing everyone around him that he was the winner. And if Donald was ever going to become the killer Fred had raised him to be, he had to take this machine somewhere bigger than a courtroom. He had to run it on Forbes magazine. By 1982, Donald had Fred's money and Cohn's playbook, but he still wasn't famous. He was just one of hundreds of real estate guys in New York. Then Forbes magazine gave him a stage. In 1982, Forbes launched the Forbes 400, the first ever list of the 400 richest Americans. Get on the list, and you weren't just a real estate guy anymore, you were a winner. There was just one problem: Donald wasn't rich enough. His actual net worth was about $5 million. The Forbes 400 started at $100 million. A normal businessman would have built up his fortune over the years. Donald was not a normal businessman. Forbes, Jonathan Greenberg speaking. "Hi, this is John Barron, Vice President of the Trump Organization." "Okay, I'm just calling to make sure you have Mr. Trump's net worth correct for your new list." "Sure. What number do you have?" "Well, Mr. Trump owns about 90% of his father's empire, so that puts him at about 100 million. "That's higher than we had. We had him at 5. "That's incorrect." "I'd need 1 moment. What do you say, boss?" Mr. Trump confirms, possibly more. He's a very rich man, very rich. "Oh, wow." The reporter wrote it down. Donald owned exactly 0% of his father's company, but Donald had said it confidently, so Forbes wrote it down. That fall, Forbes published its very first 400 list. Donald Trump was on it at $100 million. What happened next was a house of cards. First, the banks. Banks lend you money based on how rich they think you are. So when banks read in Forbes that Donald was worth $100 million, they thought, this guy can pay us back, and started handing him millions in loans. Then the bond market saw the banks lending and decided to lend Donald even more. And then came Holiday Inn. Holiday Inn was one of the biggest hotel chains in America. They were looking for a partner to build a casino in Atlantic City. They wanted someone rich, someone successful, someone who clearly had the money to make it happen. They saw the magazine listing, they saw the banks lending, they saw the bond market trusting him, and they thought, this is our guy. So they came to Donald with a partnership offer to build a casino together, each card held up by the one before it. Nobody actually checked Donald's real wealth and skills, and at the very bottom card was Donald, sitting alone in his own office, pretending to be a guy named John Barron, fooling everyone. In 1982, Holiday Inn's board agreed to fly to Atlantic City to inspect Donald's casino construction site. There was no construction site. Donald hadn't built anything, so Donald called his construction supervisor. Get every bulldozer in Atlantic City to the site, every dump truck, every piece of equipment that moves dirt. For what? Doesn't matter. Dig holes, fill them in, dig them again. But sir, isn't that a waste of resources? Well, Holiday Inn doesn't have to know that, do they? When the Holiday Inn board arrived, the site was alive. Bulldozers everywhere, dirt flying, men shouting. Only one board member noticed that the same hole was being dug in the same place over and over again. But the rest of the board didn't ask. They were too excited. By 1987, Donald was famous enough to put his name on a book. He hired a journalist named Tony Schwartz to ghostwrite a book about how brilliant Donald was. It was called The Art of the Deal. In it, Donald wrote, in his own words, "I play to people's fantasies. A little hyperbole never hurts." He admitted that he was fooling everyone. Yet people didn't notice. The book sold 1 million copies. Donald Trump became a household name. 2 years before the book came out, Donald's first casino, Trump Plaza, had opened in Atlantic City. It made money. It made Donald look like a winner. But Donald didn't want one casino. Donald wanted the biggest casino ever built. He had a name picked out for it, the Taj Mahal. Here's the thing about the Taj Mahal. A company called Resorts International had started building it. Their founder died, the company couldn't finish it, and the half-built casino sat there as a billion-dollar problem nobody could solve. But Donald walked in, and the same crowd that had pretended along the first time around, Forbes, banks, the bond market, the public, pretended along again, even harder. The banks lined up to lend him more money to finish it. The bond market lined up to buy more of his paper. The press called him the comeback king of Atlantic City. Nobody asked the obvious question, how was a half-broken casino run by a guy who had never finished one this big going to pay anyone back? Because asking would have meant admitting everyone had been wrong from the very beginning. So nobody asked. And the parade kept going, all the way to what Donald was about to call the eighth wonder of the world. Most people, when they say something is the eighth wonder of the world, are exaggerating. Donald wasn't exaggerating. Donald was advertising. To finish the Taj Mahal, Donald needed $675 million. The banks wouldn't lend him that much, not even after the Forbes lie, not even after Trump Plaza. So Donald went to the public. He printed bonds for regular people. Give Donald $1,000 now, and he has promised to pay you back plus 14% interest later. 14%, way more than a normal loan. Why so high? Because Donald was so risky to lend to, nobody would do it for less. But the public, school teachers, retirees, people who'd read The Art of the Deal and trusted the Trump name, bought the bonds anyway. Mrs. Henderson, the most successful businessman in America right now, who is it? Donald Trump. The Art of the Deal. Forbes has him at 100 million, banks love him, and today, ma'am, you ride with him. The Trump Taj Mahal, 14%, guaranteed. 14% is a lot. Grandchildren, ma'am? You got grandchildren? 3. Imagine this. college fund, 3 grandkids, debt-free, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, all because this morning, Mrs. Henderson, you picked up the phone. 5,000? 10? 10, I guess. Wonderful decision, Mrs. Henderson. Welcome to the 8th wonder. Many trusting Mrs. Hendersons later, Donald had what he needed. But here's the thing about borrowing $675 million at 14% to pay just the interest, not the loan itself, just the interest. The casino needed to make $1.3 million every single day, more than any casino on earth had ever made. The Taj Mahal opened in April 1990. Gold domes, marble, elephants, the works. Donald called it the 8th wonder of the world, and it took less than a year to collapse. The casino couldn't make the daily math. Donald filed for bankruptcy. When Donald filed for bankruptcy, the consequences didn't fall on Donald. They fell on everyone else. 253 contractors had built the Taj Mahal. Plumbers, electricians, glass workers, the team that made those giant stone elephants out front. When the casino went bankrupt, those 253 people only got a third of what they were owed. One of them was a man named Forrest Jenkins. Forrest ran a small contracting company. He'd installed all the toilet partitions in the Taj Mahal. He'd been promised $231,000. He received $70,000 after years of fighting in court. He also had to fire his own brother. Forrest's daughter, Beth Rosser, would later say, "I grit my teeth every time I see him on television, blustering about what a wonderful businessman he is." These 253 people were the only people in the entire story who weren't pretending. They had sent invoices, they had built things, they had waited for real checks. When the checks didn't come, they couldn't pretend the casino had been a success. But the banks and media above them still could, because Donald wasn't done. Even though Donald personally owed 72 banks $4 billion, Donald wasn't about to admit he was losing. Rule number 1 of the playbook, remember? Never admit anything. So the 72 banks called a meeting. They were ready to take Donald's apartments, his helicopter, his yacht, his name. Then Donald walked in. "Gentlemen, you don't actually want to take my stuff." "We don't?" "No, because if you take my stuff, the press finds out, and then you're the guys who bankrupted Trump. Imagine the headlines." Better idea. You let me keep my stuff. You give me a personal allowance. We figure this out together." "How much of an allowance?" $450,000 a month. "Why so much?" "Hair, tan, Big Macs, plane fuel, and don't forget 2 ex-wives." "Oh, the ex-wives, of course." A few days after the conference meeting, Donald was walking down 5th Avenue with his then-girlfriend Marla Maples. They passed a homeless man with a tin cup, sitting in front of Tiffany's. Donald turned to Marla and said, "That man is worth $900 million more than I am." Donald said it like a joke. The homeless man had nothing. Donald, that very week, had just convinced 72 banks to give him $450K in monthly screw you money, while the people who trusted him, the contractors, the Mrs. Hendersons, got nothing. The banks didn't help them. The banks helped Donald. 6 times in his career, Donald's companies have filed for bankruptcy. Personal bankruptcies for Donald himself? 0. Every collapse was paid for by someone else. He was their killer as his father wanted him to be. Same 4-step machine, bigger stage. By the late 1990s, the tabloids had moved on from him. An almost broke businessman wasn't interesting anymore, but his brand was still alive. And in 2003, a British TV producer was about to walk into Trump Tower with an idea that would change everything. If you walked into Trump Tower's offices in 2003, you wouldn't have found an empire. You'd have found fewer than 50 employees, chipped furniture, musty carpets, a desk covered almost entirely with newspaper clippings about Donald himself. The empire was a tower with his name on it, but inside the tower, the empire was empty. Then a British TV producer walked in with an idea. His name was Mark Burnett. He just invented the modern reality show Survivor on CBS, the biggest hit on American television. Now he wanted to make a new show about business with a boss who fired people every week. Burnett had walked Trump Tower's lobby once. He'd seen Donald's name on every floor, every plaque, every elevator button. He thought, this guy is the boss. He had no idea. When Burnett's team came up to the offices to actually meet Donald, they saw exactly what the audience wasn't supposed to see. Mr. Trump. Mark, welcome to the Empire. This is where you live, eat, sleep. Yes, efficiency. Meet my employees. There are 4 of them. The other 43 are out. International, very big. Mr. Trump, I'm not sure. Mark, watch this. Hey, Bobby, you wanted to say something to me before the meeting? Oh, yes, I just wanted to say 12 years. My daughter calls you Uncle Donnie. My wife tells everyone in our church what you've done for our family. Through the bankruptcies, the downsizing, I am just so... You're fired. Sir, get out. Oh my God, you're perfect. But the show still needed to be filmed somewhere appropriate, and Donald's actual boardroom? Too small, too dingy. It looked like your room after a week of your mother forgetting to check on you. So Burnett's team rented vacant retail space on the 4th floor of Trump Tower and built a boardroom set there. For the next 14 seasons, every "You're fired" Donald ever said on TV was filmed inside that fake boardroom, above an empty Trump Tower storefront. The show ran 14 seasons. Donald earned $197 million. A generation of Americans met him as the boss. Years later, the people who built that version started apologizing. NBC's head of marketing, John D. Miller, wrote, "I helped create a monster." Tony Schwartz, who had ghostwritten The Art of the Deal, said about that book, "I put lipstick on a pig." He started donating every royalty check to causes Donald hated. The audience didn't notice. The show kept running. Meanwhile, off camera, Donald started Trump University. It wasn't a university. It was a series of expensive seminars where ordinary people paid between $1,495 and $35,000 to learn the secrets of Donald Trump's success from instructors Donald had never met. All right, everyone, before lunch, please fill out the evaluation form on your chair. But the seminar isn't over. We do it now, standard procedure. How do I know if it was any good? Trust me, it was good. Mark excellent for everything. Even though I haven't actually learned anything? Sir, have you been paying attention? Nobody learns anything here. That's the seminar. 6,000 gems later, Donald Trump was sued for fraud. He told reporters he would never settle. He would fight for Trump University in court forever. Until November 2016. By then, Donald wasn't running a casino. He wasn't running a TV show. He wasn't running a real estate seminar. By then, Donald was president-elect of the United States. 10 days before his trial, while assembling his cabinet, Donald paid 6,000 students $25 million. He never admitted a thing. Rule 3. Settle without admitting guilt. The 4-step machine wasn't running on a casino anymore or a TV show. It was now running on the United States of America. In June 2015, Donald Trump announced he was running for President of the United States. The audience that had spent 14 seasons watching Donald Trump fire people in a fake boardroom now watched him ask to be the boss of the country. He won. In 2017, his signature law passed, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. He sold it as relief for working families. The actual numbers? The top 1% of Americans got an average tax cut of $61,090. The bottom 60% got less than $500. He fooled 253 contractors in 1991 to tens of millions of voters in 2017. In 2024, Donald ran again. He promised lower prices. He promised a golden age for the American worker. He won again. In April 2025, he announced sweeping tariffs so broad they covered almost every country on Earth. Within months, 361,000 working-class jobs disappeared. Farm bankruptcies rose 46%. One of those farmers was a woman named Rebecca Carlson. Rebecca had voted for Donald. She'd been counting on a $400,000 government grant to pay her workers for the season. Then a letter arrived. The grant had been frozen. Forrest Jenkins lost his contracting business in 1991. Rebecca Carlson was about to lose her farm in 2025. Different decades, different industries, same pattern. Then in 2026, the United States went to war with Iran. 15 American soldiers died. 254 Iranian children died. None of this was America first. But people still believed it because Donald could turn anything into a win. He'd called the settlement of the 1973 racist case a win. He'd called the Taj Mahal bankruptcy a win. He'd called the 2017 tax cut a win. Everything was a win, and millions of Americans nodded along. When do the banks, the media, the government, the ordinary people finally take a step back, look at the parade, and admit that Donald isn't wearing any clothes? Who in the crowd is the child who says he isn't wearing any clothes? Because somebody has to be. Otherwise, the parade keeps going.